G'day everyone, Prep Aussie here. I hope you're all well in whatever part of the world you're watching this video. Today is Thursday, the 23rd of August 2018, and the time here is 0920 Australian Eastern Standard Time. Well folks, sorry for not doing videos of late, but unfortunately, as they say, life got in the way, and the house renos, meeting trades, etc. So it's been a bit of a full-on couple of days, and I've actually been suffering from my illness the last couple of days as well, pretty bad exhaustion, etc. So hence the reason why. I did say that I was going to do something on the Royal Commission banking, but because of what's going on here in Australia with the current leadership politics, challenged leadership. If you're not aware of it in America, well, we've currently got conservatives in, Republicans, for want of a better term. Liberals, we call them here in Australia, which is kind of funny because you guys call the Democrats liberals. We're calling the liberals and they're conservatives. It's actually a pretty interesting dynamic, because I'm going to concentrate on that today, mainly because that's the most important thing. I was going to do comments, but I'll do the comments with the Royal Commission stuff because there's a few great comments in the comments section that I want to go through. As regards to the current leadership problems, are they a problem? No, they're not. And here in Australia, we need to get used to the fact that the person that we vote for as our Prime Minister is no longer going to be the person that's going to go through to the next election. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And a lot of it's got to do with factions. At the moment, we all need to make sure or hope that Peter Dutton becomes the next Prime Minister. Why do I say that? Well, because he's in the Tony Abbott ultra-right conservative faction, if you haven't guessed. Whereas Malcolm Turnbull is in the who is an ex-Goldman Sachs player, used to work for them. And our duly elected Prime Minister here was Tony Abbott. 1 year into the job, after being the opposition leader for, I think it was nearly 8 years, 1 year into the job, poof, night of the long knives, and he was gone. And then we ended up with Turnbull, so which no one was too happy about. Now, the reason why I'm happy for Peter Dutton to become next Prime Minister is because he's obviously in the right camp, conservative right. Now, Turnbull, as you know, is a moderate lefty, tree-hugging wanker that he is, and he's no good to man or beast. And really, the only reason he's there is because of Goldman Sachs and the usual players, the Clinton Foundation, etc. All those ties go back. Now, the interesting thing here is that if Dutton gets in power, all that is going to be exposed. That's why they're fighting so hard not to get Dutton in, if you haven't figured it out. They are going to blow the bubble on this, because the Turnbull camp is aligned with the Rudd-Gillard camp. It's just a long line of shitbags that have just been ruining Australia for the last 20 years, if you want to be honest. Ever since Howard left. And look, before anyone says anything, I know everything about Howard, but give the man his dues. He did some good, and he's the only Prime Minister, apart from Menzies, I think, who actually brought Australia back into surplus. So, and Kevin Rudd blew that in 6 months. Now, the interesting thing here, Peter Dutton is being obviously put up to be the Prime Minister because everybody knows Tony Abbott would be a dead man walking. But I would highly suspect that Tony Abbott will come powering back into the fold because of immigration. And Peter Dutton is a very, he's right there with Tony Abbott on that cause. Now, if you haven't heard or you haven't listened lately, the Labor Party and the Conservatives have sort of more or less signed a pact saying we're going to let George Soros just send shitloads of immigrants to Australia. Now, the NGOs, I should have said. Soros backs NGOs, etc. They are actually mandating that. Mass Muslim immigration. Well, collectively, there's a lot of people in the government that are just going, no, we ain't going to tolerate that. And quite rightly, because, you know, as a Christian, Judeo-Christian country, the ideologies don't mix. There's no two ways about it. I don't give a shit what anybody says. And I've got Muslim friends, so they are so far removed from our lifestyle that you just got to wonder why they're even here. To be honest, why would a Muslim want to come and live in a country surrounded by beaches, fantastic outdoor lifestyle, beer swilling, drinking, macho men, love barbecues, pork, and you know everything else. So let's go and live in Australia. I just don't get that stuff. Why these people don't want to go to live in Saudi Arabia? Well, let's think about that. Yeah, I know why they don't want to live in Saudi Arabia, because they get beheaded. But it's just things like that, you know. It's just the Australian public is slowly and progressively waking up to these clowns. You know, the Gillards, the Rudds, the bloody Turnbulls. The biggest shitbag of them all is Julie Bishop. I can't wait until she's gone, and I hope to God that woman is dragged before a trial, because honestly, she is the most awful person going. Like, there's just no glamour with that person. You know, she's behind every nefarious shit deal that's ever gone on. And one of the big things that's leading this charge, by the way, folks, is the alignment of Australia with China and the alignment with America. Now, if you remember, Turnbull got dragged to Washington a couple of months back, sort of towards the beginning of the year. Or was it last year? Can't remember now. Beginning of the year it was. And he got told in no uncertain terms how things were going to be playing out with China. Well, he and Julie Bishop are both on the Chinese way of thinking. And Tony Abbott and Peter Dutton and the ultra-conservatives are not. They are definitely not. You know, sure, they realise that we need China for trade and everything else, but we don't need to be selling our ports to them, and we don't need to be selling our farms to them, we don't need to sell all our real estate to them, and we don't literally need to be just rolling over and giving China everything we got. It's a stupid way of doing things. And the Americans, quite rightly, because of Pine Gap, have said to Australia, this is stopping, guys. You're not doing this anymore. Did you notice when, after Turnbull got back, 3 new laws were passed to stop Chinese buying real estate, stop Chinese buying farms, and stop Chinese buying just about anything. No ports, no nothing. And then, embarrassingly, Turnbull and Bishop had to do a 180. Now, if you follow what they're saying, they're not saying anything. Julie Bishop says nothing, literally, about China at all. She thinks, well, if I ignore them long enough, they'll go away. And it's just probably the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. She hasn't visited there. She hasn't done anything since all of this came about. Cast your mind back a couple of years to this TPP thing. Look who's one of the big wigs, or he's the Chinese, I'm trying to remember his title. He was the guy that led the government's negotiating team in the TPP negotiations with China. I just can't remember his name, but he is now the lead man for China in Australia. And he used to be a politician. He gave that post up at a whim, absolute whim, and went and worked for the Chinese after he'd done all the deals. That's how nefarious that part of the government is, folks. And that smacks of corruption and any other nefarious word you want to use with it. These guys, and look, you and everybody else in Australia needs to understand that the politicians are not there for Australians anymore. You need to understand that. They're there for their own purposes. But, having said that, I think there's some people in the parliament that are now starting to understand that the Australian public is extremely pissed off and the Australian public wants more back for their politicians, from their politicians, in regards to, hey, how about you start listening to us for a change? And Tony Abbott knew that the last time he came into power. If you look at what happened there, yeah, he's a bit of a shitbag as well, but, you know, if you look at the budget he tried to bring in, it was more or less listening to the Australian people and saying, well, you know, stop being a welfare state, get off your ass and go and get jobs, etc., etc. All those lines of reasoning are in that side of the government. And tell me, just remind yourselves, who was the person that turned back the boats? Tony Abbott. Labor and Malcolm Turnbull are currently negotiating to just open the floodgates again. They are actively negotiating on that, folks. So they have a bipartisan theory on screwing up Australia. And quite rightly, certain sections of the government are saying, well, the Australian people are not going to vote us in again if we do that. And not only that, as I said to you, in the last Super Saturday elections, which just amazes me they call it Super Saturday, but it's not super at all, it had the lowest voter turnout in history in Australia. And we are required by law to vote in Australia. And they had the lowest turnout in history. People just went, I'd rather get a fine and vote for any of you wankers. And that's fair income. That's exactly what happened. So I think one or two of the places, they could have actually gone to court and said the voter turnout was so low that it didn't meet the minimum requirements. It didn't constitute a broad majority of the electorate. That's how bad it is here now. Now, people have said, you know, Prep, you should run for Parliament. What? Why would I want to associate myself with a bunch of nefarious shitbags whose only cause is to better their own standing in life? They've forgotten about all of us. I would only go to Parliament or the Senate on one condition, is that it improved the standing of the everyday Australians in life. You know, it's just a joke. It's gotten past the stage of a joke. We're actually getting into the stages now of an actual rebellion and uprising and rebellion, one of the two. But it's getting that bad. And I'll be the first one to start calling for it pretty soon if things don't change. Because I'm not letting my kids grow up in this bloody shithole, miserable, universe that they've encompassed us all in to make sure that we're all little sheeple. Sorry, I ain't doing that. So, by the end of today, if I'm correct, there should be a new Prime Minister of Australia. If not tomorrow. That will go well for us here in Australia in the short term. because they'll be aligned more to Trump, they'll be aligned more to America, and they will be less inclined to align themselves with the Chinese. That's my take on it. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I don't think I will be. So, be interesting to see your comments and thoughts, guys, but times they are a-changing. And on that note, we'll go to the prayers. Okay, folks, verse of the day. I can't believe some of these sometimes. He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all things? Wow, pretty cool. As always, folks, we'll end with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power and the glory, for ever and ever. Amen. All right, folks, I'll leave it there. Interesting days ahead. God bless. Prep out.